I'm sorry, is something wrong, Will? You seem upset.
I'm okay, I don't want to talk about it. You maintain that between dress rehearsal and air that I went and put a tighter shirt on. I thought it just put a little more mustard into it.
Will Ferrell has a gift, not just for being hilarious, but for completely unraveling everyone around him. Whether he's charging into a scene in patriotic underwear or delivering the world's most serious line about a cowbell, Ferrell doesn't just steal the spotlight, he obliterates it. Some actors break character with a smirk, others fall apart mid-line. But what happens when even the pros, the unshakable veterans, can't hold it together? And what unexpected prop or off-script moment finally sends them over the edge? One sketch even had a surprise guest that derailed everything. This isn't your average blooper reel. It's a front-row seat to unscripted chaos, courtesy of comedy's most unpredictable wild card. 15 More Cowbell. The More Cowbell sketch from Saturday Night Live has become one of the most iconic moments in the show's history, largely thanks to Will Ferrell's absurd commitment and Christopher Walken's perfectly deadpan delivery. Airing in 2000, the sketch features a fictional behind-the-scenes look at the recording of Blue Oyster Cult's hit song, Don't Fear the Reaper. Ferrell plays Gene Frankel, an overzealous cowbell player whose ridiculous enthusiasm completely disrupts the session. Despite the absurdity, both Ferrell and Walken manage to stay completely in character, which only heightens the comedy for the audience and their fellow cast members. While Ferrell and Walken anchored the scene with their straight-faced performances, the rest of the cast had a much harder time keeping it together. Jimmy Fallon and Chris Kattan, in particular, visibly struggle not to laugh throughout the sketch. Fallon, playing the band's guitarist, keeps hiding his face or looking around in attempts to stifle his giggles, while Kattan, for his part, has his moments of turning away from the camera and resting up. The more they tried to stay in character, the funnier it became, with Ferrell stomping around in a small midriff-bearing blouse and tirelessly pounding that cowbell. Subtle magic lies in that balance of chaos and control. More Cowbell is that sketch. Ferrell and Walken cocoon one another in a realistic role play, aloof from the mad premise of the sketch. The reality of it enhances its absurdity. Thus, the tension made it even more torturous for the other players. The sketch eventually became a cultural landmark, from which "I gotta have more cowbell" now emerges as a pop culture phrase, true to the way Will Ferrell can derail a scene in the best way possible. If you thought a cowbell could cause chaos, wait until you see what happens when drum sets, insults, and grown men acting like children collide. 14th Step Brothers. Step Brothers is a film built on absurdity, and nowhere is that more evident than in its blooper reels. Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly star as two immature, middle-aged men forced to live together as stepbrothers, and their chemistry on screen is undeniable. Behind the scenes, however, their shared sense of humor often made it impossible to get through a scene without breaking character. The film's outrageous dialogue and improvisational style led to countless takes derailed by laughter, especially during the most raunchy or ridiculous moments. Whether they were arguing over drum sets or inventing new curse words, Ferrell and Reilly constantly pushed each other to the edge. The wonderful thing about the Step Brothers bloopers is that everything turns upside down in a matter of seconds. The escalating absurdity of their lines made it impossible for any one of them to keep a straight face. Reilly would go into hysterics at the unflinching delivery from Ferrell, while Ferrell would lose it to the unexpected interruptions from Reilly. The scenes with weird insults, awkward physical comedy, and gross-out gags had the tendency to go straight into laughter territory. It seemed that a great portion of the time, it was not just about who was going to make the audience laugh, but who could get the other actor to break first. That spirit shining through the Step Brothers bloopers provides the basis for their fame. It's clear that Ferrell and Riley weren't just working together. They were having a blast. And that fun came across loud and clear in the resulting film, which exudes a sort of crazy, offbeat charm because of it. That so many of the scenes had to be reshot because of laughing just adds more credence to its status as one of the silliest comedies to come along in a while. Following Ferrell's lead, Step Brothers showed that sometimes the best moments come when the whole thing goes off the rails. 13. The Louvas, SNL. In the recurring Saturday Night Live sketch, The Louvas, Will Ferrell and Rachel Dratch portray a bizarre, overly affectionate couple named Roger and Virginia Clarvin, who have a penchant for oversharing their romantic escapades. The sketch is set in settings like hot tubs or couples retreats, where they make everyone around them extremely uncomfortable with their graphic descriptions and awkward physical closeness. One of the most memorable versions of this sketch aired in 2001 and featured Jimmy Fallon, who was completely unable to keep a straight face. What the audience didn't know at the time was that Ferrell was playing an invisible game of footsie with Fallon under the table, pushing the actor into a fit of barely contained laughter. Fallon's attempts to silence his laugh were part of the performance in itself. The viewers could see him visibly shaking as he covered his mouth and face away from the camera in a vain attempt to maintain character. In contrast, Ferrell was never caught off guard, but delivered his lines with the greatest seriousness as Ferrell acted out the physical torture. That off-screen prank turned what was already a ridiculously absurd sketch into something even funnier, as Fallon's constant breaking showed the audience just how unpredictable and mischievous Ferrell could be behind the scenes. It rapidly became a favorite sketch among fans, thanks not just to its bizarre characters, but also to the obvious camaraderie and chaoticness among the cast. A follow-up of the 2002 The Louvas featured Jack Black as a guest, and it was his turn to flake. Black lost it when Ferrell entered in a full wizard costume and commenced to talking in earnest intensity. Just like poor Fallon before him, Black succumbed to Ferrell's resoluteness and unpredictability. Maybe impromptu footsie or ridiculous costumes, The Louvas proved to be one of those sketches in which simply showing up was enough for Ferrell to distract the hell out of his castmates. 12th, Evil Boss, SNL. In the Saturday Night Live sketch, Evil Boss, Will Ferrell takes on the role of an unhinged corporate manager whose calm demeanor is constantly interrupted by violent, explosive outbursts. What starts as a routine office scene quickly descends into chaos as Ferrell's character lashes out at his employees with unprovoked aggression, only to return to polite conversation seconds later. The genius of the sketch lies in its unpredictability. No one, including the actors, knows when Ferrell is going to snap next. This element of surprise, combined with Ferrell's intense delivery, creates a powder keg of tension and comedy on set. The turmoil in the workplace was further witnessed by guest host Pierce Brosnan, who played a lead role in a satirical pseudo-documentary about corporate culture or whatever, with trademark piquant and composed performances. At first, he somehow holds on to his great sense of poise, apparently responding to great confusion and discomfort that perfectly suited the scene. But that only lasts to the point when Ferrell's character begins to truly lose it, screaming threats, tossing various objects, and even stabbing a coworker with a trident, at which point Brosnan starts visibly cracking. All composure apparently draining away from him, he begins giggling while trying to cover his face and turn away from the camera to recover between lines. This sketch demonstrates Will Ferrell's brand of comedy based on complete unpredictability and commitment. Ferrell infused some tonal shifts and exaggerated aggression that kept the other cast members, including his actual co-stars, completely off balance. It was Ferrell himself who stretched the limits of absurdity, leaving others with the duty of trying to hold an expression. Even a rock-steady performer like Pierce Brosnan couldn't help but laugh. Evil Boss remains one of the more memorable SNL moments, not just for its insane premise, but for capturing the unique mayhem that comes to life when Ferrell is in front and center, looking totally in control, while more than half the time pretending that it's all going nuts by itself. 11th, Anchorman. The original Anchorman. The legend of Ron Burgundy is now considered a comedy classic, but what happened behind the scenes was just as hilarious as what made it to screen. With a cast full of seasoned comedians like Will Ferrell, Paul Rudd, Steve Carell, and David Koechner, the set was a constant battlefield of improv, with each actor trying to outdo the others with the most ridiculous and unexpected lines. The result was a mountain of outtakes, where scenes would collapse under the weight of the cast's uncontrollable laughter. Many takes ended with someone breaking character, proving just how infectious the energy on set really was. The one man to set the stage is Will Ferrell, with his absurdity and methods of portraying the pompous, clueless Ron Burgundy character. When Ferrell was not accusing the Human Torch of having been denied a bank loan, he was busy concocting ridiculous phrases to warm his voice, leaving an opportunity for everyone in the room, including the crew, to respond. Because he acted so spontaneously that every take would be different, the rest of the cast would often find themselves struggling to keep a straight face, and this steady influx of ridiculous one-liners made for an often wild atmosphere in which remaining in character was almost impossible. The outtakes of Anchorman turned out to be a legend of their own when giving a casual glimpse into the individualistic spirit that was stirred while making the film. The outtakes don't only bring out the immense tautness of the cast, but also show the wonderful chemistry that he and her were ready to dive right into sheer absurdity for the sake of comedy. Director Adam McKay encouraged those freedoms in ways that let those actors play off one another into absurdity. As such, it wasn't a film, it was a whole experiment of pushes in improvisation. Breaking character became almost inevitable, and that much fun the cast had carried over into every scene. 10. Gus Chiggins, Old Prospector, SNL. The Saturday Night Live sketch featuring Gus Chiggins, the Old Prospector, is a perfect example of Will Ferrell's ability to derail an entire scene simply by entering the room. In the sketch, a group of soldiers receives a serious mission briefing, only for Ferrell to arrive dressed as a dusty, toothless old prospector named Gus Chiggins. With his high-pitched drawl, nonsensical rambling, and absurd references to cinnamon and gravy, Ferrell immediately turns the scene into a comedic free-for-all. The sudden contrast between the military setting and Ferrell's ridiculous character was more than enough to make the cast lose control. Jimmy Fallon, recognized for breaking character during sketches, was the first victim of Ferrell's shenanigans. The second Ferrell opened his mouth, Fallon was almost undone, throwing his hands over his face or turning away from the camera with laughter. The rest of the cast joined him quickly, barely able to compose themselves, while Ferrell was running wild with the Old West caricature. Every distraction, from Gus Chiggins's attire to his speech, was purposely designed to be as weird and unsettling as possible. And it worked like a charm. The moment Ferrell unleashed hell, no one stood a chance. The genius of the Gus Chiggins sketch comes not from its structure or its story, but from the way Ferrell, in consideration of an alternate reality, wholly inhabits a character who does not belong in the scene. This odd juxtaposition of a prospector amongst soldiers is as hilarious as Ferrell's performance style, and body behavior rendered his fellow actors incapable of keeping a straight face. One classic case where Ferrell weaponizes absurdity, taking the sketch so far off the rails that it becomes funny merely because the cast wasn't able to handle it. Gus Chiggins didn't just give a few directions to the soldiers, he stole the whole damn show. 9. Reality Stars SNL. In the Saturday Night Live sketch Reality Stars, Will Ferrell plays one half of a couple who have clearly watched too much reality television and absorbed every bit of it. Channeling the most over-the-top personalities from reality shows, Ferrell's character is loud, dramatic, and completely self-absorbed. The sketch takes place during what should be a normal backyard barbecue, but Ferrell turns it into a full-blown reality TV meltdown, complete with shouting matches, wild confessions, and exaggerated poses. His performance is so intentionally ridiculous that it immediately throws the entire tone of the scene into chaos. Kate McKinnon and Aidy Bryant are two SNL stalwarts who are known for being pretty darn good at holding themselves together in absurd sketches. And so, it completely undid both of those actresses when Will Ferrell went to work on them. You can see both of them struggling to control their laughter at his performance, while he goes strutting through the scene pompously alive with trademark Ferrell intensity, whilst beautifully ripping off the dramatic flair of reality stars. One of his unpredictable outbursts, or their over-the-top delivery, caught them out more than once and forced them to turn away from the camera or spontaneously giggle in the middle of delivering a line. Watching them try so hard to hold it together just made it all the funnier to the audience, who could totally see how much fun the cast was having. Ferrell couldn't keep a straight face through most of the sketch. Near the end, after delivering an especially absurd line, he cracks up for a moment, something the usually stiff comedian rarely does. Ironically, it was the family dog who was probably the only character unaffected by the silliness. The dog calmly sat there as everyone else almost lost it in hysterics, oblivious to the pandemonium surrounding him. Reality Stars immediately became one of the show's favorites, not just for its satire, but for how perfectly it demonstrated Ferrell's power to swallow a scene with irrepressible laughing. Just when you think the laughter couldn't get any more uncontrollable, Ferrell takes things from backyard chaos to full-blown big-screen breakdowns. 8. The Other Guys. In The Other Guys, Will Ferrell plays Alan Gamble, a mild-mannered forensic accountant with a bizarre and deeply unexpected personality. Paired with Mark Wahlberg's hot-headed detective, Ferrell's character regularly steals the spotlight with his deadpan delivery of completely absurd lines. One of the film's standout aspects is how Ferrell's unpredictable humor breaks down even the most composed actors. A perfect example is Eva Mendes, who plays Gamble's stunning and sophisticated wife, Dr. Sheila Ramos. Throughout the film, Mendes is tasked with playing the straight character, responding sincerely to Gamble's outrageous behavior, and the result is comedy gold. The behind-the-scenes tapes and bloopers show just how tricky it was for Mendes to keep her focus in the midst of shooting scenes with Ferrell. Most of Mendes's lines were thrown off by those of Ferrell, who improvised them or took them into truly strange directions. Whether Ferrell was bragging about his gator tattoo or delivering ridiculous compliments in an utterly serious tone, Mendes was laughing during the scene more than once because Ferrell's unpredictability caught her off guard. As a dramatic actress, not usually associated with broad comedy, Mendes found Ferrell's absurd charm too funny, even as she tried to play it straight. His character feels real and distant simultaneously. Almost all that he utters is wildly unstable. In fact, that is where the quite bizarre and contrasting Yet funny performance comes into play with the likes of Mendez, who have more serious, realistic roles around them. The more serious things get, the more ridiculous Ferrell becomes, and that creates an irresistible tension that's often made worse by breaking the people's composure in the cast. The Other Guys doesn't just depend on plot or action to succeed, but also because of how Ferrell's performance creates comedic friction with everyone else around him, pulling eerily authentic reactions from the most serious actors on the set. 7. Curry SNL. In the memorable Saturday Night Live sketch featuring Will Ferrell as legendary Chicago Cubs broadcaster Harry Curry, absurdity was the name of the game. Ferrell's portrayal of Curry is a wild, exaggerated version of the real-life announcer, complete with slurred speech, bizarre questions, and completely nonsensical tangents. In this particular sketch, Ferrell is paired with actress Joan Allen, who plays a NASA scientist trying to discuss serious topics like space exploration. However, Ferrell's Curry has no interest in staying on script, instead bombarding her with questions like, "If you were a hot dog, would you eat yourself?" and other increasingly ridiculous statements. The sketch was memorable for the fact that Allen seemed so visibly vexed to keep up with Ferrell's comic frenzy. With Ferrell spewing an unending barrage of nonsense references to sandwiches and then claiming Mars or the moon was made of ribs, Allen valiantly tried to hold together a somber but composed demeanor. However, the unrelenting energy and commitment of Ferrell to the lunacy began to wear Allen down. By the time Allen's professional manner truly broke down, folks in the audience began to sense how much fun truly was going on backstage. Her laughter fully warranted an instinctive release to the card-carrying insanity that Ferrell was raining upon her. According to the Harry Curry sketch, the absurd and the mundane work off of each other, Ferrell thrived in pushing his scene partners to their very limit, with the slow breakdown of Joan Allen making the moment sweeter. It is that hard commitment to the most surreal of off-the-wall fare that really puts a signature on these sketches. To watch an absolutely serious, dramatic veteran like Allen crumble was a testament of how just very disarming and genuinely funny Ferrell could be. Making the audience laugh is one thing. Making his scene partners break is a statement on his power as a comedic force. 6th, Dr. Beans Office SNL. In the Saturday Night Live sketch, Dr. Beans Office, Will Ferrell plays an incompetent OBGYN delivering terrible news to a bewildered couple in the most unprofessional ways imaginable. The sketch begins with Ferrell doing his best to stay serious as he navigates the absurd dialogue, telling the couple that their baby is missing and casually brushing off their panic with clueless remarks. His character is so wildly inappropriate and uninformed that the humor comes not just from the writing, but from Ferrell's struggle to maintain composure while delivering one ridiculous line after another. This sketch is clearly unique because of the surprise appearance of Tim Meadows, who was not originally supposed to be in the scene. Ferrell, who co-wrote the sketch, was well aware of how ludicrous the situation was, but Meadows' unexpected entrance as a hospital administrator only made things worse, in the best way. Here, Meadows delivers his lines in a calmly absurd fashion, announcing a $5,000 bill as if it were completely normal in the midst of that maelstrom. Ferrell will literally lose it at this point, having been thrown off and pretty much on the verge of breaking. Well, with that, the laughter would then go a step toward being contagious. And from then on, the sketch would begin to spin delightfully out of control. Dr. Beeman's office is the stuff of dreams in that chaos equals timing. Ferrell's usual hold on his character is pulled apart by an absurd evolution of the sketch, and Miles Meadows strikes with precision at the right moments. Rare is the moment when Ferrell cannot contain his laughter from the madness he put into motion, and that makes it all the funnier for the audience. The sketch just speaks to that magic few SNL sketches have enjoyed, wherein everything is on the verge of falling apart, with Ferrell just trying to keep it together, which is all the more reason it stands out from the pack. Occasionally, even A-list comedians will crack up at their own genius. 5. Short shorts for the USA. The Saturday Night Live sketch. Short Shorts for the USA is remembered not just for its patriotic absurdity, but for the surprise visual gag that Will Ferrell delivered with full commitment. The premise of the sketch revolves around a group of businessmen in a meeting who begin expressing their love for the country in increasingly dramatic ways. Ferrell's character, meant to symbolize unfiltered American pride, was originally supposed to show up in tight Daisy Dukes. However, in a classic Ferrell twist, he took it a step further and arrived on set wearing an American flag thong instead, completely catching the cast off guard. As soon as Ferrell stepped onto the ground, the mood in the room changed. His celebrity costume was not merely bold, but in fact, it was hilarious. And the response from his co-stars was instant. You can see several members of the cast getting flustered, trying to keep a straight face while Ferrell stands proudly, his exposed thighs and the almost non-existent strap of a thong. The downright audacity of such a visual, compounded by Ferrell's utterly serious delivery, made the scene all the more ludicrous. With an already over-the-top extreme patriotism going for the sketch, Ferrell's costuming twist sealed the fate of this one as another unforgettable comedy moment. What truly elevates the sketch is Ferrell's unwavering commitment. While the rest of the cast is clearly fighting to hold in their laughter, he never breaks character for a moment. His deadpan sincerity, delivered while wearing what amounts to patriotic underwear, is what makes the scene so effective. It's a perfect example of how Ferrell uses shock value not just for laughs, but to shake up the dynamic on set and force genuine, unscripted reactions from his fellow performers. Short Shorts for the USA wasn't just funny because of the costume. It was Ferrell's fearless execution that made it iconic. Zoolander. In Zoolander, Will Ferrell's portrayal of the flamboyant fashion mogul Mugatu is one of the film's most memorable performances. With his wild white curls, absurd outfits, and high-strung mannerisms, Ferrell turned Mugatu into a character that was equal parts ridiculous and unforgettable. One of his most famous lines, "That Hansel's so hot right now," became an instant classic, not only for its bizarre delivery, but also because of what happened behind the scenes. During the filming of that moment, Ferrell's over-the-top performance proved too much for co-star Milla Jovovich, who struggled to stay composed. Ferrell's allegiance to the outlandish personality of Mugatu made for an unstable platform where constantly keeping the cast on edge remained paramount. But even the most well-rehearsed scenes had a freshness and chaos about them because of Ferrell's vocal shifts, exaggerated gestures, and unpredictability. Just look at the scene where Mugatu relays the now infamous line. Nothing could have prepared you for how Ferrell's energy hit Jovovich like a bus. Even seasoned actresses such as her could not withstand the giggles at Ferrell's absurdly serious delivery. Jovovich had to introduce quite a few retakes because she kept bursting out into laughter, unable to find her serious face in the face of such absurd seriousness. 3. Get Hard. In the 2015 comedy Get Hard, Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart form an unlikely comedic duo, with Ferrell playing a privileged businessman preparing for prison and Hart posing as his tough coach. The film thrives on their contrasting energies, Ferrell's awkward innocence and Hart's high-octane sarcasm. While much of the humor relies on Ferrell's character being the butt of the joke, One behind-the-scenes blooper flipped the script. In a rare moment, Ferrell managed to intimidate Hart so convincingly that both actors burst into laughter. The goof occurred during what was actually an angry encounter in a scene between Ferrell and Hart's character. Regardless, that is how I would have wanted to laugh if I had to play this yummy scene. Here was Ferrell, with the scene completely ready for him to go off the charts, not even thinking for a moment that Hart would make him do it in one full-on take. And here goes Ferrell delivering the line with deadly intensity. Now, Hart is caught completely off guard. Hart's immediate surprise shows on his face as he breaks his confident stance, and, along with Ferrell, visibly proud of the moment, erupts into loud howls of laughter. Second, Tallaladega Nights. Tallaladega Nights. The Ballad of Ricky Bobby brought together a powerhouse comedic trio, Will Ferrell, John C. Reilly, and Sacha Baron Cohen, in a film that was as much about racing as it was about pushing the boundaries of absurd humor. The movie's fast-paced, improv-heavy style gave the actors plenty of room to play off each other, and they took full advantage of it. Ferrell and Reilly, already known for their chemistry, dialed up the ridiculousness in nearly every scene, while Baron Cohen's over-the-top portrayal of French Formula One driver Jean Girard added a bizarre and hilarious energy that elevated the chaos even further. Reports suggested that on the Tallaladega Nights set, all three leads would crack up hilariously in character often. Whole scenes were ruined by never-ending improvised dialogue about attacks from cougars, jazz music, and sponsorship deals. Ferrell could keep a straight face while Reilly broke the tension with wildly spontaneous responses. Between the two of them, one never knew when they were actually acting. Cohen, the most daring one in character, pushed the envelope by throwing in absurd accents, flamboyant postures, and dramatic gestures that would catch the others off guard and split their sides with laughter. And now, for the final round of on-set mayhem, where even a legendary news team couldn't survive Ferrell's comedic storm without completely losing it. 1. Anchorman II. On the set of Anchorman II, the legend continues, it quickly became clear that the biggest challenge wasn't delivering lines, it was keeping a straight face while Will Ferrell was in character. The sequel reunited the original cast of eccentric news anchors, and with Ferrell leading the charge as Ron Burgundy, the atmosphere was pure, comedic chaos. Known for his wild improvisation and absurd one-liners, Ferrell turned every take into an unpredictable adventure, forcing his co-stars into fits of laughter. It's been said that for every line that made it into the final cut, there were at least a dozen outrageous alternatives left on the editing room floor. The behind-the-scenes clips from Anchorman II show just how difficult it really was for figures like Paul Rudd, Steve Carell, and David Kushner to stay in character. Then again, it was pretty normal to have a scene just burst like a balloon mid-shot because someone had broken character, unable to take Ferrell's absurd deliveries. Whether he's rapping some nonsensical quips about San Diego or riffing gibberish as a newscaster, Ferrell continues to remain, if anything, doing the absurdity to even its most extreme level. Indeed, some scenes had to be repeated several times, only for one take to be clean. It contributed to a treasure trove of outtakes that demonstrated so much of the pure delight and spontaneity that Ferrell brought to the production. If you enjoyed watching actors completely lose it, thanks to Will Ferrell, don't forget to like, drop a comment with your favorite moment, and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes mayhem. And hey, don't go anywhere. Click on the next video on your screen for even more laughs. You won't want to miss it.